The lobby of Halstead Innovations was always immaculate, glass gleaming. White marble floors echoing the footsteps of ambition. It was a Monday morning, and tension hung heavy in the air like mist before a storm. The boardroom on the 35th floor had gone eerily silent after the CEO, Benjamin Cross, a man known for both brilliance and brutality, slammed a thick set of blueprints onto the polished table and growled, "Bring me the real architect." At that moment, the room froze. Half a dozen designers, engineers, and project leads sat rigidly upright, their mouths opening slightly, eyes darting to one another, wondering who would be sacrificed next. The blueprints were for the company's latest and most ambitious project, a sustainable innovation hub meant to change the future of tech and design. But Cross wasn't impressed. "This," he said, tapping the paper with a sharp finger, "lacks soul. It looks ... lifeless. I want architecture that breathes." "You really made this?" Silence. Outside the boardroom, mops squeaked across tiles, coffee cups clinked, printers hummed. Life went on, unaware of the drama behind the glass. Down in the maintenance wing, Maria Jennings, the janitor, adjusted the strap of her cleaning cart and started up her usual path toward the executive floors. She'd worked at Halstead for 8 years. People barely noticed her, save for the occasional polite nod or an absent-minded thanks when she emptied their bins. What no one knew what Maria never told was that before she was the janitor, she'd been a top student at a prestigious architecture school. Life had a different blueprint for her, though. After her husband died in an accident, Maria dropped everything her final year, her internship, her dreams. She took any job she could to keep her son fed and in school. Halstead offered steady hours and good insurance. Dreams could wait. She overheard bits of the commotion as she cleaned the hallway outside the boardroom. Someone inside muttered, "Who would lie about designing this?" That's when Maria's heart thudded. She had drawn those plans. 1 week ago, a young intern named Jamie had found her sketchbook in the cafeteria. Maria had been doodling ideas during her break, unknowingly leaving the book behind. The next day, Jamie apologized profusely but added, "These are amazing. Would you mind if I ... show them to my team?" She had nodded, flattered and flustered. Now, watching the stunned faces behind the glass, Maria pieced it together. Jamie had passed off the ideas as his own. Maria stood, mop in hand, invisible as always, but the weight of the moment crushed her. Then, the CEO's voice boomed again. "I said, bring me the real architect." Everyone stood frozen, until Maria Jennings slowly raised her hand. At first, nobody noticed, but the intern Jamie turned, color draining from his face. He stood too, knocking his chair back. "Wait," he stammered. "You don't mean I?" "Do," Maria said softly. "I drew those." Chuckle escaped the room, uneasy and patronizing. But when Maria walked in, wiping her hands nervously on her jumpsuit, she stood with quiet dignity. "You expect us to believe you designed this?" Someone sneered. Maria didn't reply. She opened her old notebook, the one Jamie had found in, laid it on the table. Page after page of detailed sketches, annotations, sustainable flow diagrams, and unique designs unfolded like a hidden treasure chest. Benjamin Cross leaned forward, scanning the pages. The room fell silent. After a full minute, he looked up, something flickering in his eyes. Not anger, not condescension, but curiosity. "Where did you study?" Maria told him. "And why are you cleaning floors?" The room held its breath. "My husband died," she said, "and my son was 5. I needed a job. This was the first one that let me be both a parent and a provider." The honesty in her voice silenced every smirk in the room. "But I never stopped dreaming. I sketch during my breaks. I read design journals on my phone. I follow global architecture, competitions online. I never let the dream die." A hush followed. Then Cross stood. "Everyone out," he said. The others shuffled out quickly, shooting Maria glances, some guilty, some amazed. Only Jamie lingered, whispering, "I'm so sorry." Maria looked at him. "Don't be sorry. Be better." When the room was empty, Cross asked her to sit. For the next 30 minutes, they spoke not just about buildings, but about people, about designing spaces that made people feel alive. He wasn't just hearing her. He was listening. At the end, he offered her a chance. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "Not with a mop, with a model." Maria walked out of that boardroom taller than she had in years. The staff in the hallway didn't know what had just happened, but something had changed. Her story had cracked the marble walls of Halstead Innovations and let the light in by evening. Whispers turned to chatter. The janitor who was really the genius, the woman no one saw now seen, Maria returned. Home to her son, Evan, now 15, his nose in a coding book. "How was work?" he asked, not looking up. She smiled. Unexpected. Later that night, after Evan had gone to bed, Maria pulled out her sketch pad and began building the model. She didn't know what tomorrow held, but for the first time, in a long time, it felt like her life had stepped back on its path, because kindness, humility, and resilience don't show up on resumes. They show up in actions, in quiet hands raising in loud rooms. Maria didn't sleep much that night, after Evan had gone to bed. She sat at the kitchen table with her old laptop and a set of colored pencils. The makeshift model she was working on, a blend of recycled cardboard, cork, and imagination, sat. At the center, the apartment was small, barely 2 bedrooms, with a squeaky radiator and windows that moaned when the wind blew, but it was home. And tonight, it was also a studio. She wasn't building for a job. She wasn't building to prove anyone wrong. She was building the kind of space she wished she'd had when life had pulled the rug from under her, a space that breathed hope. By dawn, the model was finished. Not perfect, but it was real. At 9 a.m., Maria walked into Halstead Innovations, not in her janitor's uniform, but in the same jeans and blazers she'd worn to her school interviews years ago. Faded but dignified, she held the model with both hands like it was sacred. The receptionist stared. "Are you here to see someone?" Maria smiled. "I have a meeting with Mr. Cross." A long pause, then a nod. "Of course. He's expecting you." As she stepped into the executive elevator, something she'd never done before, the doors whispered shut, and Maria caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished metal. For the first time in years, she saw the architect staring back. The 35th floor was humming with anticipation. News of yesterday's boardroom moment had traveled fast. Eyes followed her, but not with mockery this time, with respect. And maybe a little awe. Benjamin Cross stood by the window when she entered his office. "You came," he said. Without turning, "I was half expecting you wouldn't. I said I'd bring the model." She placed it on the glass table. The CEO turned, looked down, and didn't speak for a long time. It was a modular concept. Green walls made of living plants, rooftop solar tiles that rotated to follow the sun, a natural light funnel system, a community atrium that curved inwards like a hug. It was unlike anything anyone at Halstead had ever presented before. Didn't just scream innovation. It whispered compassion. "This is ... Cross said quietly. ... Exactly what I wanted, but didn't know how to ask for." Maria didn't smile. "Not yet. So ... what happens now?" Cross walked around the model. "You're not a licensed architect. You'd need someone on staff to technically supervise. But I'd like you to lead this design in paper, in vision, in spirit. And if you're willing, we'll sponsor your return to school. Part-time, so you can finally finish what life interrupted." Maria felt the tears before she could stop them. "Are you serious?" Deadly Cross said, "I want this. I want you." That afternoon, Maria was formally introduced to the design team. Most of them stood when she entered. Some clapped. Jamie, the intern, was there too, face flushed, eyes downcast. "I need to say something," he said suddenly. I lied. I showed Maria's work as my own. I thought it'd impress people, but she's the real deal. I'm sorry. Maria could have humiliated him. Instead, she said, "We all make mistakes. But what we do after, that's what defines us." Jamie looked up. The shame in his eyes turned to gratitude. From that day on, Maria was no longer a ghost in the hallways. She had her own badge, her own desk, her own place on the design floor. She wore clothes that made her feel seen. She began attending night classes, sometimes with her son, Evan, helping her solve geometry problems at the kitchen table. The project became more than a blueprint, became a movement within the company. Others started opening up. Security guards submitted an idea for the building's emergency flow plan. A cafeteria worker suggested a way to reduce food waste through compost. Systems. Cross, who had once been viewed as cold and ruthless, started holding open floor Fridays, where any employee could pitch an idea. Halstead Innovations changed because one person stood up and no one else did. 6 months later, at the groundbreaking ceremony, Maria stood on a small stage. The wind carried the scent of fresh earth and new beginnings. "I want to thank every person who ever felt invisible," she said to the crowd, "because I was one of you. I learned that being unseen doesn't mean you're unworthy. It just means your moment hasn't come yet. It will if you don't give up on your dream." People cried that day. People cheered. When she stepped off the stage, Evan ran to hug her. "You did it, Mom." "No," she said, kissing his forehead. "We did." That night, back in their little apartment, Maria opened her window and let the air rush in. Somewhere, across the city, cranes were moving, concrete was pouring, and the skeleton of her dream was rising from the ground. She sat at her desk, sketching again, this time not for survival, but for joy.